My life in 1966 was wonderfully ordinary, a whirlwind of new motherhood and simple joys. Then, in an instant, everything I thought I knew about existence shattered and reformed. I found myself in a swirling, silken void, moving towards an inexplicable light, where figures stood silent watch. It wasn't a dream, nor was it a feint. It was a journey beyond the veil, from which I was abruptly sent back. What happens when you glimpse eternity, only to be told, it's not your time yet?
Hey everyone! Before we dive into this incredible story, please take a quick second to subscribe if you haven't already, like this video, and let me know in the comments what's a simple joy from your childhood that you still cherish. Maybe a favorite meal or a game you loved. It's always fun to hear. Okay, I won't keep you waiting any longer. Let's get started.
I was quite worried that I would lose the baby, but fortunately the labor stopped and I was sent home, remaining pregnant until I finally went into actual labor in the evening of March 16, 1966. Before March 17, 1966, my life was a tapestry woven with the ordinary threads of a young woman finding her way in the world. I was Amy, a 23-year-old in the midst of navigating new motherhood, with a toddler already at home and another on the way. We lived a modest life, typical of the era, filled with the everyday rhythms of family, community, and the quiet aspirations that hummed beneath the surface of routine. My days were a blur of tending to my firstborn, managing our small home, and the anticipation, a mix of excitement and apprehension, that comes with expecting a new baby. I describe myself as generally grounded, practical, and perhaps a touch reserved. I wasn't one for dramatic flourishes. My joy came from the small victories, the quiet moments of connection. My hands were often busy, whether with household chores or knitting tiny garments for the impending arrival. I cherished the simplicity, the predictable comfort of our little world. Looking back, certain memories stand out, shaping the person I was. I was a very thin child, and those early years attending Catholic school left a distinct impression. I remember several occasions between the ages of 8 and 12 where I'd faint during Mass, having gone without breakfast to receive communion. The world would just go blank, a sudden, complete void, until I slowly swam back to consciousness. These episodes, though unsettling, became a strange part of my physical history, something I'd come to understand acutely later on. They taught me the feeling of a body giving out, of the lights going off. There was also a time as an adult I fainted, reinforcing this familiar sensation. This seemingly minor detail, these repeated experiences of blanking out, would become a crucial benchmark against the extraordinary event that lay ahead. They were experiences of absence, of nothingness, a stark contrast to what was to come. Emotionally, I was in a phase of contented anticipation, though it was tinged with a quiet anxiety. The pregnancy had been challenging. 2 months prior, I'd been hospitalized at only 7 months, experiencing what seemed like labor. The doctors had been grim, telling me the baby might not survive. That pronouncement had hung over me, a dark cloud threatening to eclipse the joy of impending motherhood. Even after I was sent home, the frequent labor pains were a constant, nagging worry. Would this baby truly make it? This fear, a primal concern for my child's well-being, was a significant undercurrent in my emotional landscape. Despite the worries, there was an overarching sense of purpose, a deep-seated desire to nurture and protect my growing family. My relationship with life and death before this pivotal moment was largely shaped by my Catholic upbringing. I was raised in the faith, attended Catholic schools, and the concept of an afterlife was ingrained. It was something believed, not questioned with great fervor. However, in the year or so leading up to March 1966, I'd started to drift from formal religious practice. There were certain theological points I found myself increasingly questioning, subtle disagreements that led me to stop attending church regularly. It wasn't a rejection of the idea of God or a spiritual realm, but rather a quiet, personal divergence from rigid dogma. Death was a concept, a part of life's natural progression, but it remained distant, abstract. I certainly had no personal, experiential knowledge of what lay beyond. My beliefs were inherited, largely untested, a comfortable framework that hadn't truly been challenged by the raw, visceral reality of existence's edge. That was all about to change. I was so happy that I wanted to thank God for this child surviving to full term, and got up out of my hospital bed and began walking down the hall to receive communion. March 17, 1966. It began as one of the happiest days of my life. The air in the Catholic hospital room felt lighter, imbued with a quiet joy I hadn't felt in months. Just hours before, around 1 a.m., I had given birth to my son. He was healthy, full term, a miracle after the scares and the constant worry that had shadowed my pregnancy. That earlier hospitalization, where I was told the baby wouldn't survive, had left an indelible mark, making this moment of his safe arrival all the more profound. Lying there, listening to the hushed sounds of the ward, I was simply thrilled. A deep, almost incandescent happiness filled me, a gratitude so immense it needed expression. The morning unfolded with the gentle rhythm of a hospital ward. Hushed voices, the soft rustle of nurses' uniforms, the distant clatter of breakfast trays. I felt a quiet strength returning to my body, a lightness that belied the monumental task it had just completed. My mind, however, was soaring. My son was here. He was well, and all the anxieties of the past 2 months had evaporated in the glow of his tiny, perfect presence. I'd looked at him, nestled in his bassinet, and a profound sense of peace settled over me. Life, in that moment, felt utterly complete, a perfect tableau of new beginnings. Around 8 or 9 a.m., an announcement crackled over the hospital loudspeaker, cutting through the morning calm. A priest would be giving communion, down the hall near the center desk, for anyone who wished to receive it. For me, in that state of overflowing gratitude, it was more than just a religious rite. It was an urgent impulse, a profound desire to offer thanks, to thank God, not just for the safe delivery, but for the sheer miracle of life, for defying the odds that had been stacked against my child. It felt like the most natural, most necessary thing to do. I swung my legs out of bed, a little wobbly, but propelled by this powerful wave of emotion. My body, though recovering from childbirth, felt surprisingly capable. I took a few steps, then began to walk down the hall. The polished linoleum stretched ahead, reflecting the soft overhead lights. The sounds of the hospital, once distant, grew clearer. The quiet murmur of conversations, the faint beeps of machines. My focus was singular. Reach the priest, express this overwhelming gratitude. There were no ominous rumblings, no strange premonitions. The morning was bright, my heart was full, and the destination was clear. And then it happened. Without warning, a sensation of wobbliness stole over me. It wasn't the gentle sway of recovery. This was something more immediate, more insistent. My legs felt like rubber, my vision blurred at the edges. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, pierced through my happiness. I'm going to faint, the thought flashed, a stark, undeniable certainty. I knew the feeling well, intimately familiar with the telltale signs from those childhood experiences in mass, and that one time as an adult. This was it. My eyes darted around, searching for something to brace myself against. I spotted a nurse in the distance, coming down the hall. Our eyes must have met, or perhaps I made some instinctive, desperate gesture. I don't remember calling out, but I know she registered my distress. Her casual stroll transformed into a sprint, her white uniform a blur against the muted hospital walls. The distance between us seemed to stretch, an agonizing chasm. The floor tilted. The sounds of the hospital, once so clear, began to recede, replaced by a growing hum in my ears. The world began to spin, not gently, but with a sudden, accelerating force. The light from the hallway seemed to dim, pulling inward, and a strange, unfamiliar darkness began to encroach from the periphery of my vision. There was no pain, no panic, just the stark, certain knowledge that I was losing consciousness. The last thing I remembered was the nurse's frantic run, her face a mask of concern, and then the world dissolved. Despite having just been exceedingly happy in life, I definitely did not want to go back. I know I felt an almost indescribable feeling of absolutely ultimate peace, unlike anything experienced in life. The world didn't just go blank, like those times I'd fainted before. This was different, profoundly, undeniably different. The moment I lost consciousness, the floor seemed to vanish beneath me, replaced by an astonishing, alien sensation. There was no jarring impact, no pain from the fall. Instead, I found myself enveloped, not by emptiness, but by a soft, slowly swirling black, silky whirlpool. It wasn't a dizzying spin. It was a gentle, almost luxurious motion, pulling me forward with an undeniable, almost magnetic force. I could see this swirling void, a rich, deep black that shimmered like silk, yet it was also the space I was effortlessly moving through. There was no sense of my body, no weight, no physical form. It was just me, pure consciousness, observing this strange, beautiful vortex. As I was drawn deeper into this silken current, a new element emerged. Ahead, in the distance, I could discern a circular area of light. It wasn't a pinpoint, but a soft, expanding luminescence that beckoned. I could best describe the sensation as being in a tunnel, though it defied earthly definitions of such a structure. It wasn't narrow or confining. There were no discernible walls or a ceiling, no sense of being enclosed. It was simply a path, a trajectory, guiding me towards that distant glow. The light itself wasn't blinding or harsh. It was warm, inviting, like the soft golden light of a perfect sunrise, yet infinitely more profound. It resonated with a quiet power, a promise. As I glided closer to this radiant opening, other details began to emerge from the periphery of the light. Standing to one side of the circular opening, I saw what appeared to be maybe 5 or 6 or even more individual dark shadows. They were vertical, distinctly people-shaped, arranged in a silent group. Their features were indistinct, veiled in shadow, yet their forms were clearly humanoid. There was no sound, no spoken word, yet an undeniable sense of presence radiated from them. It was a knowing, an understanding that bypassed my ears and settled directly into my mind. And then, with an almost electric jolt of certainty, I knew. Without a word, without a gesture, I somehow became profoundly aware that one of these dark, people-shaped beings, standing just within the edge of the light, was my maternal grandmother. She had passed away on May 6, 1956, almost exactly 10 years prior. The recognition wasn't visual in the conventional sense. I couldn't see her face or any specific feature, but it was absolute, an inherent knowing that resonated in the deepest part of my being. It was like a telepathic impression, a pure wave of recognition. There was no surprise, only a gentle acknowledgement of her presence, a comforting anchor in this utterly extraordinary realm. I didn't know who the other shadowy figures were, but their collective presence was one of quiet welcome. In that moment, as I drew nearer to the light and the silent waiting figures, an emotion washed over me that transcended anything I had ever known in life. It was an almost indescribable feeling of absolutely ultimate peace. Not just peace as in the absence of conflict, but a profound, all-encompassing tranquility that permeated every fiber of my non-physical self. It was a perfect stillness, a complete cessation of all earthly worries, anxieties, and even the subtle hum of daily existence. There was no fear, no pain, no lingering concern about my newborn son or the life I had just left behind. It was pure, unadulterated serenity, a sense of belonging so deep it felt like coming home. It was bliss, an unburdened state of pure consciousness floating in an ocean of calm. This profound peace was briefly interrupted, not by fear, but by a sudden, direct communication. As I edged a bit closer to the light and the beings, a voice spoke to me. It wasn't an external sound, no vibration in the air. It was a voice directly in my head, clear and unmistakable. It said, with an undeniable authority, "No, go back, it's not time yet." The voice was not from one of the beings, nor did it seem to emanate from the light itself. Its origin was unknown, its source unseen, yet its message was delivered with absolute clarity and finality. There was no room for negotiation, no space for argument. It was a command, direct and immediate. And despite the boundless happiness I had felt moments before, the sheer joy of my son's birth, a powerful, almost rebellious feeling surged through me. I definitely did not want to go back. The peace here, the absolute serenity, was infinitely more desirable than the most profound happiness I had ever experienced in my earthly life. The thought of returning to the limitations, the anxieties, the very physicality of the world I knew felt like a jarring imposition, a deep disappointment. This realm, this light, this peace, it was where I belonged. It felt more real than reality itself. This was the ultimate destination, the truest state of being. And yet, the voice had spoken. Its authority was undeniable, its message absolute. The journey, I realized with a sudden sinking awareness, was not mine to choose. My time was not yet. The next thing I knew, I was waking up on the hospital floor, and I heard myself saying out loud a few times, "No, no, I don't want to go back." The command, "No, go back, it's not time yet," hung in that ethereal space, absolute and unyielding. The gentle, silken pull that had drawn me forward through the black void abruptly reversed. It wasn't a violent jolt, but a swift, firm retraction. For a few brief seconds, I felt myself being drawn backwards, away from the comforting light and the silent, shadowy figures, away from the ultimate peace that had enveloped me. It was an instant descent from the sublime, a sensation of being disconnected from that profound tranquility. The feeling of absolute peace, which had been so all-consuming, began to recede, replaced with a nascent awareness of something else, something familiar yet jarring. Then, with no transition, no soft landing, I woke up. My consciousness snapped back, not into a soft bed, but to the hard, cold reality of the hospital floor. The light above was harsh fluorescent, a cruel contrast to the luminous glow I had just left. The sounds were no longer the soft hum of the void, but the jarring clamor of urgency. My own voice, raw and loud, was the first thing I truly registered. I heard myself saying over and over with a desperate, almost primal intensity, "No, no, I don't want to go back." The words tumbled out of me, an automatic protest against the abrupt, unwelcome return. There was an overwhelming sense of loss, a profound disappointment that ripped through me. The peace, the utter freedom, the quiet knowing that had just been my reality had been stripped away in an instant. Why was I here again? Why was I back in this heavy, cumbersome body on this cold floor? The contrast was staggering, almost nauseating. It was like being pulled from a sun-drenched, weightless dream into a harsh, dark awakening. My physical sensations crashed over me. My body felt incredibly heavy, anchored and cumbersome after the effortless lightness of the void. A dull ache resonated through my limbs, a stark reminder of the fall. I was disoriented, my head throbbing slightly, my eyes struggling to adjust to the stark hospital lighting. There was no immediate pain from the childbirth itself, but the shock of re-entry was a physical blow. I felt a faint wave of nausea, a visceral rejection of this sudden, rough re-inhabiting of my physical form. As my awareness sharpened, the chaos around me became clear. Alarms were blaring, a piercing, insistent sound that shattered the ethereal silence I'd known. Code 99, Code 99, someone was shouting, the words echoing with urgency. I was vaguely aware of being bent over by a doctor, his face a blur of concern. There were numerous other doctors and nurses, a frantic huddle of white uniforms and anxious faces, all around me on the floor. Their movements were swift, efficient, but to me, they seemed frantic, an almost absurd flurry of activity compared to the serene stillness I just experienced. They quickly brought a wheelchair, their movements precise and practiced, and carefully helped me into it. The journey back to my bed, just a very short distance down the hall, felt like an eternity. Every bump of the wheels, every subtle shift in motion was a brutal reminder of the physical constraints I had so recently escaped. The doctor who had been leaning over me issued stern instructions. I was to get back into bed immediately and not to get up again. His voice was firm, laced with concern, but I barely registered the words. My mind was still reeling from the abrupt transition, the lingering echoes of that perfect peace clashing with the harsh reality of the hospital room. Hours later, during visiting hours, my husband arrived. He looked tired, but his eyes lit up when he saw me, safe in my bed. I knew I had to tell him. It wasn't just a faint. It was something profoundly different, something that defied all my previous understanding. With a sense of urgency, I recounted the experience. The black, silky whirlpool, the light, my grandmother, the voice, the command to go back. I emphasized that it was not like fainting, that it was extraordinary and deeply strange. He listened intently, his expression shifting from concern to curiosity. He was the first person I shared it with, and his reaction was a balm. He didn't dismiss it. Instead, he said it sounded like a near-death experience, a term he vaguely remembered hearing about years before. He promised he would look into getting me some reading material about it. His belief, his willingness to consider something so outside the ordinary, was incredibly validating. It made me feel less alone, less like I had imagined the impossible. While the medical team seemed to view my collapse as a physiological event, my husband's open-mindedness offered the first glimmer of understanding for what had truly occurred. I think I was sent back to either raise my children for some purpose, or I think I may have been sent back to learn something during my life that I needed to learn to determine my place in the afterlife. The return was jarring, a rude awakening from a state of perfect peace. But the true impact of that journey beyond the veil didn't fully manifest until the dust settled, until the alarms stopped blaring and the doctors stopped bustling. My life after that day, March 17, 1966, was forever altered, not by dramatic external shifts, but by a profound internal recalibration. In the immediate aftermath, practicality dominated. I had a newborn, a toddler, and a recovering body. There was little time for profound introspection. But beneath the surface of daily routines, a quiet revolution was unfolding within me. I was glad when my husband, true to his word, found me reading material on near-death experiences, which was the first time I'd ever heard the term. It was a profound relief to learn that others had experienced something similar, that I wasn't alone in what felt like an impossible, unearthable event. This validation, however, didn't immediately translate into radical changes in my outward life. I didn't suddenly quit my everyday responsibilities or embark on some grand spiritual quest. My priorities remained my family, my children. Yet my perception of those priorities had fundamentally shifted. The small, seemingly mundane moments with my sons now held an unspoken, almost sacred weight. Every giggle, every sleepy breath, every milestone felt imbued with a deeper significance, as if I had been granted a precious, fragile gift that could have been taken away. My relationships didn't change drastically on the surface. My husband believed me, which was a tremendous comfort. Other friends and relatives, when I eventually shared my story, largely accepted it, perhaps with a touch of polite bewilderment. It was only my children, later in life, who would insist it was a mere biological reaction, unable to reconcile my account with their own logical frameworks. This was a minor disappointment, but it didn't diminish the truth of my experience for me. The biggest change was internal, affecting how I related to myself and my place in the world. The most profound transformation occurred in my worldview. Before, I had been raised Catholic, believing in an afterlife, but my faith had been more of an inherited framework, a set of comforting tenets. In the year or so leading up to the experience, I had even drifted from formal church attendance due to certain theological disagreements. But after that day on the hospital floor, belief became knowledge. I didn't just believe in an afterlife. I knew it existed. I had been there, or at least to its very threshold. The black, silky whirlpool, the guiding light, the undeniable presence of my deceased grandmother, these weren't abstract concepts or articles of faith. They were vivid, visceral realities. This knowing wasn't about dogma or specific religious practices. In a strange twist, while the experience affirmed the existence of an afterlife, it didn't draw me back to formal religion. If anything, it deepened my understanding that all religions might be different paths to the same fundamental truth, different human expressions of an intuitive grasp of the divine and the eternal. I felt that if the other side was so universal, encompassing even the presence of a deceased relative, then perhaps the specific doctrines of earthly religions were less critical than the underlying belief in a greater existence. This realization led me to remain unaffiliated, acknowledging the validity and contribution of all faiths to a better society, while personally connecting with the essence of spirituality rather than its structured forms. My understanding of life's purpose also gained a new dimension. While I didn't receive a grand, explicit revelation about the meaning of all life, I felt a deep, enduring conviction about my purpose. I often ponder that perhaps I was sent back for a reason. Maybe it was to raise my children, to guide them, to imbue them with something essential during my earthly journey. Or perhaps it was to learn something during my life, a lesson or a piece of wisdom crucial for my place in that serene afterlife I had glimpsed. This thought became a quiet driving force. It wasn't a rigid mission, but a subtle undercurrent, making me more observant, more reflective, always wondering, what am I meant to learn today? What is this experience teaching me that I need for later? Integrating this extraordinary experience into an ordinary life hasn't been without its subtle challenges. The world continued as it always had, but I carried a secret, a profound memory that few could truly grasp. The initial disjunction, the shock of being pulled from absolute peace back into the world's weight, lingered as a deep appreciation for the fragility and fleeting nature of our physical existence. There was no existential crisis, no dark night of the soul, because the experience itself was entirely pleasant, filled with an incredible peace that left no room for doubt or fear. The only difficulty was the occasional feeling of being slightly out of sync with those who hadn't walked that path. They couldn't fully comprehend the depth of that peace, the certainty of the not yet. This experience, so utterly unlike fainting, has remained as real to me today as it was in 1966. Its details are etched into my memory, recounted consistently over the years because they are undeniable. It didn't grant me psychic gifts or extraordinary abilities. What it gave me was an unshakable inner knowing that there is more to existence than what we perceive, that death is not an end but a transition. My greatest hope, the quiet prayer that echoes within me, is that when my time truly comes, I will earn the right to return to that same place I almost entered, to the light, to the profound peace, and to the silent, knowing presence of those who await. Ultimately, my journey has taught me that the universe holds mysteries beyond our comprehension, and that life, with all its complexities and challenges, is a precious opportunity. It is a classroom, perhaps, where we learn what is necessary before our true journey continues. My story is a testament to the idea that sometimes the most profound truths are found not in grand revelations, but in quiet, unexpected moments that shatter our preconceived notions and illuminate the boundless nature of reality. It's a reminder that even when we feel lost, there is always a path, a light, and a timeless peace awaiting us.
Wow, what an absolutely incredible and moving account. Amy's experience truly challenges our understanding of life, death, and what lies beyond. It's so powerful to hear how one moment can forever change someone's entire worldview. Thank you so much for watching and listening to Amy's story. If it resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more profound narratives. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What part of Amy's experience surprised you the most, or made you think differently about life's purpose? May God bless you all, and remember that even in life's most challenging moments, there's a greater plan and a peaceful destination awaiting us. See you in the next video.